Today I'm going to show you how to replace the intermediate steering shaft on your car. Now underneath the vehicle here we have the intermediate steering shaft, and it takes rotational motion from the steering column, goes through the firewall and connects to the rack and pinion over here. You can see when I turn the steering wheel how that shaft rotates. Now looking up from underneath the vehicle, if we follow the steering shaft as it comes out of the firewall, we have this universal joint over here, and that's what's causing a clunking while turning because it's worn out, and we need to replace at least the lower section of this shaft. So here we have the whole steering shaft. We've got a pinch bolt that goes onto the steering rack. We have this universal joint that sits outside the firewall. We have this boot to separate the firewall. It is a telescoping shaft, and we've got finally a universal joint that sits at the top, and this part plugs into the steering column. Now the shaft is held in by two 12mm pinch bolts, one at the bottom here and one inside the vehicle. So I'm just going to put on my 12mm socket with a long extension here and try to break this pinch bolt free. And there's the pinch bolt. Now this bolt actually has a knurling on the inside here. That's why it was so difficult to turn and break free. I'm just going to use a flat screwdriver here to open up this pinch a bit. Just going to use some brake cleaner to spray this down. I'm just going to come in with my wife's something here and just wipe this up so it's nice and clean. Now I'll just take a little bit of white paint here and paint a little mark on the steering shaft where that slot will line up to, because we have to get the timing correctly. So here we are underneath the dashboard. We've got the steering wheel over here, and if we follow it back under the dash, you have the intermediate steering shaft over here where it goes into the firewall itself. And if you follow this back, you can see that there's a universal joint over here, and at the top of the universal joint there is that pinch bolt that we need to remove. I'm going to use my 12mm ratchet to loosen up this pinch bolt over here. So I've removed all of the trim underneath the steering wheel just so we can have a closer look at what's going on. We've got the universal joint there. We have the pinch bolt that's removed. Let's use a little bit of white paint here to mark off that steering shaft. That's really important to keep the steering wheel aligned while the steering shaft is disconnected from the vehicle. Otherwise you could break the clock spring or ruin your alignment when you put the shaft back on. I'm just going to use a screwdriver here and pry off that steering shaft. Next up I'm going to remove this boot cover here and pull back this rubber from the firewall. Now I'm going to knock off the steering shaft from the bottom here. And now I can reach in and remove the steering shaft from the firewall. So here we have the old steering shaft removed from the vehicle. I can feel this universal joint is really loose and floppy. And we've got the telescoping part over here. It's well lubricated. And this joint is also very floppy. It's important to make sure that the wheel itself doesn't turn with the steering shaft disconnected. It's important to make sure all the joints are very well lubricated, as well as the telescoping shaft and the top universal joint over here. Now I'm going to feed the new shaft into the hole into the firewall. And here I have the shaft on the other side. I'm just going to install that onto the steering rack itself, making sure that the slit lines up with the line that I made before. Now I'm going to catch that 12mm pinch bolt. So from the inside of the vehicle, I'm just going to take the intermediate shaft and plug it into the steering column over here. Make sure that the steering wheel is straight when I plug it in. So now that the steering shaft is in, I'm going to replace this 12mm bolt. So I'm going to push this boot ring down here. All that's left is to put together the bottom half of this dashboard. Now we're going to put the wheel back on. Finally, we're going to take the vehicle for a test drive and make sure the steering steers nice and smoothly.